In 1965, the United States military arrived in Vietnam. Backed by an undefeated historical record and the world's most advanced technology, American leadership expected a swift and decisive victory. But the country they entered was already scarred by decades of conflict. The Vietnamese had spent generations repelling foreign control, recently forcing out both French colonizers and Japanese occupying forces. Leading the North was Ho Chi Minh. He viewed the struggle as a single, decades-long campaign for total national independence and the reunification of the country. The era's driving anxiety was the domino theory. Washington feared if Vietnam turned red, neighboring nations would collapse in a chain reaction. To prevent this, the U.S. committed ground troops to prop up South Vietnam, turning a regional dispute into a Cold War proxy conflict. The initial deployment was massive. Thousands of young, well-equipped personnel poured into the country, confident that American logistics and industrial might would easily overwhelm the opposition. While Washington was managing a global board game of ideological containment, their opponents in the North were fighting for the very soil beneath their feet. To secure victory, the U.S. relied on its greatest advantage: overwhelming conventional firepower and total aerial supremacy. This strategy was Operation Rolling Thunder. The goal was to bomb the North into submission, dismantling their infrastructure and supply lines from the sky. On the ground, the military deployed napalm. This sticky, incendiary weapon cleared dense terrain while inflicting physical and psychological devastation. Millions of gallons of Agent Orange were unleashed to strip away the jungle canopy, denying the Viet Cong their hiding spots and food sources. Despite unleashing the most concentrated display of firepower in history, this high-tech strategy struggled to defeat an enemy that simply refused to fight a conventional war. The Viet Cong responded with an invisible guerrilla strategy, using the dense jungle as their primary weapon against American machinery. To evade detection, they constructed the Cu Chi tunnel system, a massive subterranean world that allowed them to move supplies and troops directly beneath the feet of American patrols. These tunnels functioned as complete military and civilian hubs, housing operating rooms and weapon forges, hidden entirely from aerial surveillance. Above ground, the Viet Cong relied on ambush and trap tactics. Hidden spike pits and sudden, vanishing firefights meant every step was a potential death sentence. The psychological toll was heavy. American troops lived in a state of constant, exhausting paranoia, unable to distinguish the enemy from the local civilian population. This tension peaked during the 1968 Tet Offensive. While the U.S. repelled the massive surprise attack militarily, the sheer scale of the assault shattered the government's credibility at home. For the American public, the offensive was the turning point, the moment it became clear the military was trapped in an endless, bloody stalemate. As the realities of the stalemate reached American living rooms, a wave of massive anti-war protests spread across college campuses. Facing this domestic pressure, the Nixon administration began a phased withdrawal, gradually bringing American troops home. The formal end to U.S. combat operations came in 1973 with the Paris Peace Accords. 2 years later, the final evacuation of Saigon marked the total defeat of the South and the unification of Vietnam under communist rule. The human legacy remains visible today. Thousands of traumatized veterans returned to a country that viewed the war as a failure, while the Vietnamese landscape still bears the scars of millions of unexploded bombs and the toxic effects of Agent Orange. Vietnam demonstrated that overwhelming military technology and firepower cannot easily overcome a decentralized, resilient force fighting for its own soil.